The great meeting hall of the Galactic Council was bigger than most cities. Hundreds of different alien beings sat in rows that went up and up like a huge stadium. The air buzzed with strange sounds as creatures from all over the galaxy talked to each other in their own languages. Some had tentacles, others had wings, and many looked like nothing anyone from Earth had ever seen before. Queen Zelara sat alone at a massive table in the center of it all. She was tall, maybe 6 feet, and her body was covered in dark plates that looked like black armor. These plates were part of her skin and they shined under the bright light. She had 4 arms instead of 2, and her eyes were large and made up of thousands of tiny parts that could see everything around her at once. Her people called these compound eyes, and they missed nothing. Other aliens in the hall kept looking at her and then quickly looking away. Some made faces like they had smelled something bad. Others whispered to their friends and pointed at her when they thought she was not watching. But Zelara saw everything with those special eyes of hers. She heard their mean words too, even when they tried to be quiet about it. For 3 years now, Zelara had been the ruler of the Vorthok Empire. Her people lived on dozens of planets that were rich with rare metals and crystals that everyone wanted to buy. She had changed her empire from a place that loved war into a place that loved peace and trade. Her planets were safe and happy now. Her people respected her and thought she was a good leader. But none of that mattered to the other aliens in the galaxy. They all thought she was too ugly to be around. They thought her 4 arms were weird and her compound eyes were scary. Her people, the Vorthok, looked like giant insects to most other species, and that made everyone afraid of them. In the galaxy, it was normal for rulers to marry rulers from other planets to make their governments friends with each other. But no one wanted to marry Zelara or anyone from her family. No one even wanted to be friends with her empire because they thought she and her people were too frightening to look at. Zelara tried not to let it hurt her feelings, but it was hard. She was smart and kind, and she cared about making life better for everyone in the galaxy. She had ideas that could help solve big problems like hunger and pollution, but no one wanted to listen to her because they could not get past how she looked. Today was supposed to be special. The council was meeting to talk about working together to explore new parts of space. Zelara had brought plans for new ships that could travel farther than ever before. She had also brought ideas for colonies where different species could live together peacefully. But she sat alone while other rulers sat with their friends and allies. The doors at the back of the hall opened with a loud sound. A group of humans walked in, and they looked around like they had never seen anything like this place before. Earth was new to the galactic community, and most humans had never been to space before. The leader of the human group was a man who looked to be in his 30s. He had brown hair and kind eyes, and he wore a blue uniform with badges that showed he was important. His name was Captain Jake Murphy, and he worked for the Earth Diplomatic Corps. His job was to make friends with alien species and help Earth become part of the galactic community. Jake looked around the huge hall and felt amazed by all the different creatures he saw. He had studied about alien species for years, but seeing them in person was incredible. His eyes moved from one group to another until they landed on Queen Zelara sitting alone at her table. Most humans might have been scared of how she looked, but Jake had read about the Vorthok people. He knew they were peaceful now, and that they had created many useful inventions. He also knew their customs and traditions because he believed that understanding other cultures was the most important part of his job. While other species kept their distance from Zelara, Jake walked straight toward her table. He stopped a few feet away and bowed in the way that Vorthok people bowed to show respect. It was a deep bow, with his arms crossed over his chest. Zelara's compound eyes focused on him with surprise. In all her years of dealing with other species, no alien had ever bothered to learn Vorthok customs. Most of them did not even try to pronounce her name correctly. But this human had shown her the proper respect that her people valued. "Your Majesty," Jake said in English, then repeated the greeting in the Vorthok language. His pronunciation was not perfect, but it was clear he had practiced. "I am Captain Jake Murphy of Earth. It is an honor to meet you." Zelara's mandibles, the parts of her mouth that moved when she talked, clicked together in a way that showed she was pleased. "Captain Murphy," she replied in English that was much better than his Vorthok. "Thank you for showing proper courtesy. Please, Sit if you wish. Jake sat down at her table, something that made other aliens in the hall stop their conversations and stare. He did not seem to notice or care that they were watching. I have read about your work with atmospheric processing, he said. The way your people have cleaned the air on the mining worlds is amazing. For the first time in a long while, Zalera felt excited to talk about her work. Most beings only wanted to discuss trade deals or military matters, but Jake seemed genuinely interested in the science and environmental projects that she cared about most. We have learned that taking care of planets is more important than just taking things from them, she explained, using two of her arms to gesture while the other two reached for data tablets. A healthy world gives back more than a damaged one. Jake nodded and asked smart questions about her methods. He told her about Earth's own environmental problems and how humans were learning to fix them. They talked about terraforming, which meant changing planets to make them better for life. They discussed new ways to grow food and clean water. As they talked, other delegates in the hall began their official meetings. But Jake and Zalara were too interested in their conversation to pay much attention. They found that they both cared about the same things, making life better for all species, protecting planets, and finding ways for different peoples to work together. During a break in the meetings, Jake heard some of the other aliens making cruel jokes about Zalara. A group of tall blue creatures from the Altair system were laughing and calling her the Monster Queen. They said things like, who would want to look at that thing? And how can something so ugly think it can lead anyone? Jake saw how bright eyes grew dim when she heard these words. Her forearms, which had been moving gracefully during their conversation, became still. Her proud posture, the way she had been sitting up straight and confident, began to slump. The worst moment came when Ambassador Vex of the Altarian Collective stood up to give a speech. He was supposed to talk about trade agreements, but instead he looked directly at Zalara and said, perhaps we should remember that some beings are simply too hideous for civilized company. Beauty and grace are important in leadership, and some species clearly lack both. The hall went completely quiet. Every eye turned to look at Zalara, then at the Altarian ambassador. Jake felt anger rise up in his chest like a fire. He had seen this kind of cruelty before on Earth, when people were mean to others because of how they looked or where they came from. Jake stood up slowly, his chair scraping against the floor in the silence. Ambassador Vex, he said in a clear, strong voice that carried through the entire hall. I have been in this room for less than 1 day, and I have already learned more from Queen Zalera than from all the other speeches combined. If you think beauty is only about appearance, then perhaps you need to learn what real leadership looks like. He turned to face the entire assembly. On Earth, we have a saying, don't judge a book by its cover. It means that the most important things about someone are not what you see on the outside. Queen Zalara has transformed her empire from war to peace. She has created technologies that help planets heal. She has ideas that could benefit everyone in this galaxy. But you cannot see past her appearance to recognize her value. Jake sat back down next to Zalara, who was looking at him with something like wonder in her compound eyes. No one had ever defended her like this before. No one had ever stood up to the bullies who made fun of how she looked. The hall remained silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, the meetings continued. But something had changed. Jake had shown everyone that at least one species in the galaxy was willing to judge others by their character instead of their appearance. As the day went on, Jake and Zalara continued to work together on proposals for environmental protection and peaceful exploration. Other delegates watched them with curiosity and surprise. Here was a human who was not afraid of the Vorthok Queen, and a queen who seemed to trust this human completely. When the meetings ended for the day, Zalara turned to Jake with gratitude. In her strange but beautiful eyes, "Thank you," she said simply. "It has been a long time since anyone saw me as more than a monster." Jake smiled at her, and for the first time in years, Queen Zalara did not feel alone in the galaxy. 3 days after the incident at the council meeting, Jake received a message on his personal communicator. The small device beeped softly as he was reviewing trade reports in his quarters aboard the Earth ship Liberty. When he opened the message, he saw it was from Queen Zalara herself. The message was written in both English and Vorthok script. Jake could only read the English part, but he was impressed that she had taken the time to write in both languages. The message was simple and polite. Queen Zalara was inviting him to visit her flagship, the Sovereign's Pride, for what she called a private discussion about our mutual interests in environmental cooperation. Jake smiled as he read the formal words. He could tell that Zalara was being very careful with her language, probably because she was not sure if other humans would approve of their friendship. He sent back a reply, accepting her invitation and saying he looked forward to learning more about Vorthok science. 2 hours later, a small Vorthok shuttle arrived at the Liberty to pick up Jake. The pilot was a young Vorthok male named Crix, who spoke decent English. As they flew toward the massive Vorthok ship, Crix explained that Queen Zalara rarely invited aliens aboard their flagship. In fact, Jake would be the first human ever to set foot on a Vorthok royal vessel. The Sovereign's Pride was enormous, at least 3 times bigger than any Earthship Jake had ever seen. Its hull was dark like Zalara's skin plates, and it was covered with beautiful patterns that seemed to move and shift in the light. Crix explained that these patterns were not just decoration, they were actually a form of communication that all Vorthok could read from a distance. When Jake entered the ship, he was surprised by how warm and comfortable it felt inside. He had expected something cold and mechanical, like the military ships he was used to. Instead, the corridors were wide and curved, with soft lighting that reminded him of sunset on Earth. The walls were covered with what looked like living plants. Though they were unlike any plants Jake had ever seen, Vorthok crew members stopped what they were doing to stare at Jake as he walked past. Most of them had never seen a human before. Some clicked their mandibles in what Crix explained was curiosity, not anger. A few of the younger crew members even waved at Jake with one of their forearms, which made him smile and wave back. Queen Zalara met Jake at the entrance to her private quarters. She was not wearing the formal robes she had worn at the council meeting. Instead, she wore something that looked more comfortable, like casual clothes. Jake noticed that her natural skin plates were actually quite beautiful up close. They had subtle colors in them that changed depending on how the light hit them. "Welcome to my home, Captain Murphy," Zalara said, gesturing for him to enter. "I hope the journey was not too uncomfortable for you." Jake stepped into her quarters and stopped. In amazement, the room was nothing like what he had expected. The walls were lined with shelves that held plants from what must have been dozens of different worlds. Some of the plants were tiny and delicate, while others were large with strange shapes and colors. The air smelled like flowers and rain. One wall was covered with artwork that showed peaceful scenes from various planets. Jake recognized some Earth landscapes among them, though he wondered how. Zalara had gotten pictures of places like the Grand Canyon and Niagara Falls. Another wall had shelves full of books and data, tablets in many different languages. But what surprised Jake most were the sculptures scattered around the room. They were made from some kind of crystal that caught the light and threw rainbow colors across the walls. The sculptures were incredibly detailed and beautiful, showing scenes of different alien species working together, playing together, and living in harmony. "Did you make these?" Jake asked, pointing at one sculpture that showed human children and Vorthok young ones playing some kind of game together. Zalara's compound eyes seemed to sparkle with pleasure. "Yes, I enjoy working with crystal. It helps me think and plan. That particular piece is something I imagined after reading about human family structures. I wondered what it would be like if our children could play together." Jake studied the sculpture more closely. He could see that Zalara had spent a lot of time learning about human culture. The children in the crystal scene were wearing clothes that looked like real Earth clothing, and they were playing with toys that existed on human worlds. "You have studied my species quite thoroughly," Jake said. "I study all species that interest me," Zalara replied, using 2 of her arms to tend to some of the plants, while her other 2 arms prepared tea. Jake watched in fascination as she "So is it, Lee? Humans are particularly interesting because you are new to the galaxy. Yet you seem more willing than most species to accept differences." They sat down at a low table surrounded by cushions. The tea Zalara served was warm and had a taste that reminded Jake of mint and honey. As they drank, she told him about her education and her interests. Jake learned that Zalera had studied at the finest universities in the galaxy before becoming queen. She spoke 7 different alien languages and had degrees in environmental science, political theory, and interspecies psychology. I became queen when I was very young, Zalera explained. My father died in an accident, and I was the only heir. I had to learn very quickly how to lead people and make difficult decisions. But what I really wanted to do was continue my scientific research. Jake asked about her research, and Zalara's whole manner changed. She became excited and animated, using all 4 of her arms to gesture as she explained her work. She had developed new ways to clean poisoned soil and polluted water. She had figured out how to grow food in places where nothing had grown before. She had even created new types of medicine that worked on many different species. The problem is that most species will not let us share this knowledge with them, Zalera said sadly. They are afraid that if they accept help from the Vortok, others will think they are weak or desperate. Jake felt angry on her behalf. Here was someone who could help solve problems that affected billions of beings across the galaxy, but prejudice was preventing her from doing so. That is not just unfair, he said. It is stupid. My people have a saying, pride goes before a fall. It means that being too proud to accept help usually leads to failure. They talked for hours about science, politics, art, and philosophy. Jake discovered that Zalera had read many books about Earth culture and human history. She knew about human wars and human achievements. She understood human emotions better than most humans understood alien emotions. I have always been fascinated by human concepts of beauty, Zalera said at one point. You have such diverse ideas about what is attractive. Some humans prefer tall people. Others prefer short people. Some like dark skin. Others like light skin. You seem to find beauty in almost every variation of your species. Jake thought about this. I think humans learn that diversity makes us stronger. When everyone looks the same and thinks the same, we miss opportunities to grow and learn. But when we include different types of people, we get better ideas and better solutions to problems. Zalera was quiet for a moment, looking at Jake with her compound eyes. Do you think humans could ever find beauty in a species like mine? She asked. Softly, the question surprised Jake with its honesty and vulnerability. He looked at Zalera carefully, really seeing her for the first time. Her dark plates were not ugly at all. They were elegant and graceful, like armor made by an artist. Her 4 arms moved with a coordination that was amazing to watch. Her compound eyes were incredibly expressive, showing intelligence and kindness. And curiosity? I think the problem is not with how you look, Jake said finally. I think the problem is that most species have never taken the time to really see you. They look at you and see something different from themselves, and that scares them. But different does not mean bad or ugly. Different can be beautiful, too. Zalara's mandibles clicked softly, which Jake was beginning to understand meant she was pleased or touched by something. You are very kind, Captain Murphy. But you do not have to say nice things just to make me feel better. I am not just being kind, Jake said seriously. I am being honest. Humans have learned that beauty comes in many forms. We have learned to appreciate the beauty in things that are not like us. Your grace, your intelligence, your creativity, your compassion. These are all beautiful things. And yes, I think your physical form is beautiful too, in its own way. They continued talking as the ship's lights dimmed to simulate nighttime. Jake learned that Zalera wrote poetry in her spare time and that she played a musical instrument. That sounded like wind chimes mixed with whale songs. She learned that Jake had grown up on a farm and that he had joined the diplomatic corps because he believed that understanding between different peoples was the key to peace. As the evening progressed, Jake found himself more and more impressed by Zalera. She was not just intelligent and talented. She was also funny and warm and surprisingly easy to talk to. When she laughed at one of his jokes about Earth politics, the sound was like music, even though it was completely different from human laughter. When it was time for Jake to return to his ship, Zalera walked him to the shuttle bay. "Thank you for visiting me," she said. "It has been a long time since I had such an enjoyable conversation." 2 weeks after Jake's visit to the Sovereign's Pride, everything changed. Jake woke up in his quarters on the Liberty to find an urgent message waiting for him. It was from Admiral Patricia Collins, his boss back on Earth. The message was short but serious. "Murphy, we need to talk. Video call in 1 hour. This is about your relationship with the alien queen." Jake felt his stomach drop. He had been careful to keep his growing friendship with Zelera professional in all his official reports, but he knew that other diplomats had been watching them. At every council meeting, he and Zelera sat together and worked on projects together. They had become a team that everyone noticed. When the video call connected, Admiral Collins appeared on Jake's screen. She was a stern woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. She had been Jake's mentor for years, but today she looked worried and disappointed. "Jake, I'm going to be direct with you," she said without any greeting. "There are reports that you have developed personal feelings for Queen Zelera of the Vorthok Empire. Is this true?" Jake took a deep breath. He had known this conversation would come eventually. "Admiral Queen Zelera and I have developed a friendship based on mutual respect and shared goals. She is an intelligent and capable leader who has been unfairly treated by the galactic community." "That's not what I asked you, Captain," Collins said firmly. "I asked if you have personal feelings for her, romantic feelings." Jake was quiet for a long moment. He could lie, but that would not be fair to Zelera or to himself. "Yes, Admiral, I do have feelings for her, strong feelings." Collins rubbed her forehead like she had a headache. "Jake, do you understand what you're saying? You're talking about falling in love with an alien. Not just any alien, but one that most of the galaxy considers frightening and ugly. This could destroy your career and damage Earth's reputation in the galactic community." "With respect, Admiral, I think you're wrong," Jake said. "Queen Zelera is one of the most remarkable beings I have ever met. She is brilliant, kind, and beautiful in her own way. If humans are going to succeed in the galaxy, we need to show that we can see past appearances and appreciate other forms of life." Admiral Collins stared at him through the screen. "Beautiful, Jake. She looks like a giant insect. She has 4 arms and compound eyes. How can you possibly find that attractive?" Jake felt anger rise up in his chest. The same way humans learn to find beauty in all the different types of people on Earth, beauty is not just about looking like us, Admiral. It's about grace and intelligence and character. Zelera has all of those things. The conversation continued for another hour, with Collins trying to convince Jake to end his relationship with Zelera, and Jake refusing to abandon someone who had become so important to him. Finally, Collins gave him an ultimatum. "I'm giving you a choice, Captain Murphy. You can end this inappropriate relationship and continue your career, or you can pursue it and face the consequences. Think carefully about what you're throwing away." After the call ended, Jake sat in his quarters feeling confused and upset. He cared about his career, but he cared about Zelera more. The thought of never seeing her again, never talking with her again, made him feel empty inside. Meanwhile, on the Sovereign's Pride, Zelera was having her own difficult conversation. Her sister, Princess Kythera, had come to visit her. Kythera was younger than Zelera and more traditional in her thinking. She had heard rumors about Zelera's friendship with the human captain, and she was not happy about it. "Sister, you are making a fool of yourself," Kythera said as they sat in Zelera's garden room. "The whole galaxy is talking about how the Vorthok Queen spends all her time with a human. It makes our people look weak and desperate." Zelera looked up from the plant she was tending. "I spend time with Captain Murphy because he is intelligent and respectful. He treats me like an equal, not like a monster to be feared. But he is human, Zelera. He is nothing like us. How can you possibly have real feelings for something so different from our kind?" Zelera set down her gardening tools and faced her. "Sister, the same way I have feelings for art and music and poetry from other worlds. Beauty and love are not limited to one species, Kythera. If they were, the universe would be a very small and lonely place." Kythera shook her head. "The Council of Elders is talking about this. They say you are bringing shame to our family name. Some of them are even suggesting that you are not fit to rule if you cannot make better decisions about your personal life. This News hit Zelera hard. She had worked so hard to be a good queen for her people. The thought that her personal happiness might cost her the throne was painful, but the thought of giving up Jake was even more painful. What I do with my personal life is my own business, Zelera said finally. I have been a good queen. I have brought peace and prosperity to our empire. If the council wants to remove me for finding friendship and possibly love, then perhaps they need to examine their own hearts. The next day, Jake and Zelera met at a neutral space station called Haven Prime. They had been invited to work together on establishing a research facility there. But both of them had other things on their minds. As they walked through the station's botanical gardens, they were both quiet and thoughtful. You seem troubled, Jake, Zelera said finally. Is something wrong? Jake stopped walking and turned to face her. My superiors on Earth want me to stop seeing you. They think our friendship is inappropriate and dangerous for my career. Zelera felt her heart sink. The Vorthok had two hearts, and both of them seemed to stop beating for a moment. I see. And what did you tell them? I told them that I care about you too much to just walk away because they're uncomfortable with our friendship. They found a quiet bench in a corner of the garden surrounded by flower and plants from a dozen different worlds. Jake sat down next to Zelera, closer than he had ever sat before. He could smell her natural scent, which was like cinnamon and rain. Zelera, I need to be honest with you about something, Jake said. My feelings for you have grown beyond friendship. I know it probably sounds crazy, but I think I'm falling in love with you. Zelera's compound eyes widened in surprise. No one had ever said those words to her before. Jake, are you certain? I am not like the females of your species. I cannot give you the kind of relationship that humans normally have. Jake reached out and gently took one of her hands in both of his. Her skin was warm and smooth despite being covered in natural armor plates. I don't want a normal human relationship. I want a relationship with you. With your brilliant mind and your kind heart and your beautiful soul. Zelera looked down at their joined hands. Jake's skin was so soft compared to hers and so pale, but his touch was gentle and warm, and it made her feel things she had never felt before. The elders of my people say, I am bringing shame to our family by caring for you. Are you ashamed of caring for me? Jake asked softly. Zelera met his eyes with her compound ones. No, I am proud to care for you. You are the first being in the galaxy who has seen me as more than a monster or a political tool. When I am with you, I feel like the person I always wanted to be. Jake smiled and moved closer to her on the bench. Then let's stop worrying about what other people think. Let's focus on what we think and feel. As they sat in the garden, surrounded by the beauty of plants from across the galaxy, Jake and Zelera talked about their feelings for each other. They talked about the challenges they would face and the people who would oppose them. But they also talked about the possibilities, the chance to show the galaxy that love could exist between any two beings who truly understood and cared for each other. When a sudden storm struck the space station, forcing all visitors to take shelter in the underground emergency areas, Jake and Zelera found themselves alone in a small storage room. The lights were dim, and they could hear the storm raging outside through the station's hull. Are you afraid? Zelera asked, using two of her arms to check the room's air supply, while her other two arms held emergency supplies. Not when I'm with you, Jake said honestly. You make me feel safe. In the dim light of the emergency room, with the storm making the station shake around them, something changed between them. Zelera reached out with one of her hands and gently touched Jake's face. Her fingers were different from human fingers, longer and stronger, but her touch was incredibly gentle. You are so strange to me, she said softly. Your skin is so soft, and you only have two arms. But when I look at you, I see something beautiful. Jake leaned into her touch. You're not strange to me anymore. You're perfect, exactly as you are. When their lips met in their first kiss, it was awkward at first. Their mouths were shaped differently, and they had to learn how to fit together. But the emotion behind the kiss was pure and strong. In that moment, surrounded by the storm, they both knew that they had found something special and rare. True love that crossed the boundaries of species and worlds. They spent the rest of the storm talking quietly and holding each other. Jake traced the patterns on Zalara's arm plates and found them more beautiful than any artwork he had ever seen. Zalara ran her fingers through Jake's hair and marveled at how soft and fine it was compared to the tough bristles that covered Vorth's heads. When the storm passed and they emerged from the emergency shelter, other beings at the station stared at them with curiosity and surprise. The news of Jake and Zalara's engagement spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Within hours of their proposal at Haven Prime, every major news network was broadcasting the story. The headlines were dramatic and often cruel. Human, Captain Demary, Monster Queen, interspecies marriage shocks galaxy, and Earth's diplomat falls for alien beast. Jake returned to the Liberty to find his crew staring at him with a mixture of amazement and concern. Some of the younger crew members seemed excited about the historic nature of his engagement, but the older officers looked worried about what this might mean for Earth's reputation in the galactic community. Lieutenant Sarah Blake, Jake's second-in-command, approached him privately in his quarters. "Captain, is it true? Are you really going to marry Queen Zalara?" Jake looked at his friend and colleague with tired eyes. He had not slept well since the proposal, knowing that the hardest part was just beginning. "Yes, Sarah, I love her, and she loves me. We want to spend our lives together." Sarah sat down across from him, choosing her words carefully. "Sir, I respect your feelings, but have you thought about the practical issues? How would you even live together? Where would you make your home? What about children?" These were questions that Jake had been asking himself. "We'll figure it out as we go." People who love each other always find a way to make things work. Meanwhile, on the Sovereign's Pride, Zalara was dealing with even stronger opposition from her own people. The Council of Elders had called an emergency meeting to discuss what they saw as a crisis that threatened the very foundation of Vorthok's society. Elder Vextar, the oldest and most respected member of the council, spoke for the group. "Your Majesty, this marriage cannot be allowed to proceed. You are the queen of our people. Your bloodline must remain pure. To mix with an alien species would be an insult to our ancestors and a betrayal of our traditions." Zalara stood before the council in her formal robes, her forearms held in a position that showed both respect and defiance. "Honored elders, I have served our people faithfully for 3 years. I have brought peace where there was war, prosperity where there was poverty. Have I not earned the right to choose my own happiness?" "Your happiness is less important than your duty," Elder Vextar replied coldly. "You are not just a person. You are a symbol. What message does it send to our people if their queen chooses an alien over one of her own kind?" "It sends the message that love is stronger than prejudice," Zalara answered. "It shows that our people are wise enough to judge others by their character rather than their appearance." The council argued for hours, but Zalara would not change her mind. Finally, Elder Vextar issued an ultimatum. "If you proceed with this marriage, the council will have no choice but to consider whether you are fit to remain as our queen." Zalara felt a chill run through her body, but she kept her voice steady. "Then that is a choice you will have to make, but I will not abandon someone I love just to satisfy your fears." As the opposition grew stronger, something unexpected happened. Support began to emerge from surprising places. The first came from the Aquatic Federation, a group of water-dwelling species who had long been treated as second-class citizens in the galactic community because of their unusual appearance. Ambassador Koralzinger, speaking for the Federation, released a public statement. The Aquatic Federation congratulates Captain Murphy and Queen Zalara on their engagement. For too long, the galaxy has been divided by superficial differences. This union represents hope for a future where all beings can find acceptance and love regardless of their physical form. The statement encouraged other marginalized species to speak out in support of the marriage. The silicon-based crystalline collective, the energy beings of the Plasma Consortium, and even some progressive members of more traditional species began to voice their approval. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, Earth's leading xenobiologist, appeared on galactic news networks to defend the marriage from a scientific perspective. Interspecies relationships have occurred throughout Earth's history, and they have always led to greater understanding and cooperation between different groups. Captain Murphy and Queen Zalara's marriage could be the beginning of a new era of interspecies cooperation. But for every voice of support, there were 10 voices of opposition. The Saurian Empire, led by Emperor Rethvar, threatened to cut all trade relations with both Earth and the Vorthok Empire if the marriage proceeded. The Centaurian Republic called for Jake to be stripped of his diplomatic status. Several other major powers began discussing economic sanctions. Jake and Zalara met again at Haven Prime to discuss their options. The opposition was so strong that some of their advisors were suggesting they call off the engagement for the good of their respective peoples. Maybe they're right, Jake said, as they walked through the station's observation deck, looking out at the stars. Maybe we're being selfish. If our marriage causes economic problems for billions of people, how can we justify that? Zalara took his hand with 2 of hers while using her other arms to adjust her travel cloak. Do you want to call off our engagement? Jake looked into her compound eyes and saw his own doubts reflected there. No, I love you more than I've ever loved anyone, but I don't want to hurt innocent people just to be happy. Then we need to make sure our wedding becomes a symbol of unity rather than division, Zalara said thoughtfully. We need to show the galaxy that our love is not a threat to anyone, but rather an opportunity for everyone to learn and grow. They decided to plan a wedding that would celebrate the diversity of the galaxy rather than hiding from it. Instead of a small private ceremony, they would invite representatives from every known species. The wedding would be held at Haven Prime, the neutral space station where they had fallen in love. Jake and Zalara spent weeks learning about each other's marriage traditions. Human weddings involved exchanging rings and making vows in front of witnesses. Vorthok marriages included a complex ritual dance that told the story of the couple's relationship and their hopes for the future. Jake began taking dance lessons from Zalara, though. Learning to move gracefully with only 2 arms while she used all 4 was quite a challenge. Zalara practiced wearing a modified human wedding dress that accommodated her unique body shape while incorporating traditional Vorthok ceremonial elements. The most touching part of their preparation was the creation of their wedding vows. They decided to speak in both English and the musical Vorthok language, with translations provided for all the attending species. I want to promise to love every part of you, Jake told Zalara as they practiced their vows. Not just the parts that are easy to love, but all of you. Your brilliant mind, your generous heart, and yes, your beautiful form that others are too blind to appreciate. Zalara's mandibles clicked with emotion. I want to promise to stand with you against any storm, to be your strength when you are weak, and to share with you all the wonders this galaxy has to offer. As the wedding day approached, ships began arriving at Haven Prime from across the galaxy. Some came out of curiosity, others out of respect, and many came hoping to witness what they expected to be a disaster. The station's administrators had to expand their docking facilities to accommodate all the visitors. Human musicians worked with Vorthok composers to create music that blended both cultures. Earth's finest chefs collaborated with Vorthok Food Prepares to design a reception menu that could be enjoyed by multiple species. Artists from dozens of worlds contributed decorations that celebrated diversity and unity. On the morning of the wedding, Jake stood in his preparation room wearing a specially designed suit that incorporated symbols of honor from Vorthok culture. His hands shook slightly as he adjusted his collar for the 10th time. Nervous? Asked Dr. Rodriguez, who had come to serve as his best woman since Jake had no family in space. Terrified, Jake admitted. Not about marrying Zalara. I've never been more certain of anything in my life, but about everything else. What if this causes more problems than it solves? What if we make things worse for everyone? Dr. Rodriguez smiled at him. Jake, do you know what courage is? It's not the absence of fear. It's doing the right thing, even when you're afraid. You and Zalara are showing the galaxy what courage looks like. In her preparation room, Zalara was having similar doubts. Her sister Kithara had come to help her dress, despite her earlier opposition to the marriage. You look beautiful, sister, Kithara said, as she helped adjust Zalara's ceremonial armor that had been modified with flowing fabric elements from Earth. Wedding traditions like a queen should look on her wedding day. Do you really think we're doing the right thing? Zelera asked. So many people are angry about this wedding. What if Jake and I are making a terrible mistake? Cathara looked at her sister thoughtfully. I have watched you for the past few months. I have seen how you light up when you talk about Jake. I have seen how happy you are when you're with him. If that's not worth fighting for, then what is? The wedding ceremony took place in Haven Prime's largest assembly hall, which had been decorated with flowers and crystals from hundreds of worlds. Representatives from over 50 species filled the audience, creating a sea of different shapes, colors, and sizes that had never been seen together in one place before. 1 year after their wedding, Jake and Zelera stood together on the bridge of their shared flagship, the Unity. The ship was a marvel of engineering that combined the best of human and Vorthok technology. Its hull was sleek like Earth vessels, but strong like Vorthok ships, and it carried symbols from both cultures on its sides. The galaxy had changed dramatically since their marriage. What had started as a controversial union between two unlikely lovers had become the foundation for the most important treaty in galactic history. The Haven Accords, named after the space station where they fell in love, had been signed by over 100 species. Captain Murphy's Alara, we're receiving a message from the Crystalline Collective, announced Lieutenant Commander Sarah Blake, who now served as their Joint Operations Officer. Sarah had been one of the first humans to fully accept the marriage, and she had become close friends with both Jake and Zelera. Put it on screen, Sarah, Jake said, using one arm to hold Zelara's hand while his other arm operated the ship's controls. They had learned to work together so smoothly that other crew members often said they moved like one person with 6 arms instead of 2 people with different bodies. The screen filled with the shimmering image of Crystal Minds, the collective's primary representative. The being looked like a living diamond that constantly changed colors as it spoke. Greetings, Captain and Queen Murphy Zalara. The collective wishes to report that the joint mining operation on Kepler 4 for 2B has exceeded all expectations. The cooperation between our workers and yours has resulted in a 30% increase in efficiency. Zelera smiled, her mandibles clicking with pleasure. That is wonderful news. Crystal Mine 7, the sharing of knowledge between our species, continues to benefit everyone involved. After the call ended, Jake and Zelera walked through their ship to inspect the various departments. The Unity's crew was made up of beings from 12 different species, all working together in harmony. In the engine room, human engineers worked alongside Vorthok technicians to maintain the hybrid power systems. In the medical bay, doctors from various worlds shared their knowledge to treat patients of any species. The most amazing sight was in the ship's school, where the children of crew members from different species played and learned together. Jake and Zelera often visited the school, and today they found human children teaching Vorthok younglings how to play basketball while young crystalline beings showed everyone how to create beautiful light patterns. Aunt Zelera, Uncle Jake, called out a small human girl named Lucy Chen. Her parents were part of the diplomatic team, and she had adopted Jake and Zelera as honorary family members. Look what Crix taught me. Young Crix, son of the pilot who had first brought Jake to the Sovereign's Pride, helped Lucy demonstrate a simple Vorthok greeting dance. Lucy's movements were clumsy compared to Crix's natural grace, but both children were laughing and having fun. That's wonderful, Lucy, Zelera said, kneeling down to the girl's level. You're learning to appreciate the beauty in other cultures. As they continued their tour, Jake and Zelera discussed the challenges they still faced. Not everyone in the galaxy had accepted their marriage or the changes it had brought. There were still species that refused to trade with them, and some groups actively worked to undermine the peace they were building. The Saurian Empire is still causing problems, Jake said as they reviewed reports in their shared office. Emperor Rethvor has been spreading propaganda about species contamination and trying to convince other governments to boycott the Haven Accords. Zelera nodded thoughtfully, using 2 of her arms to organize documents while her other 2 arms prepared their evening meal, but his influence is shrinking. More species join the Accords every month as they see the benefits of cooperation. Fear is powerful, but hope is stronger. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent communication from Dr. Elena Rodriguez on Earth. The scientist appeared on their screen looking excited and slightly out of breath. Jake, Zalera, I have incredible news, Dr. Rodriguez said. Genetic compatibility studies we've been conducting have shown something amazing. While you two cannot have biological children together, we've discovered that your DNA patterns complement each other in ways that could lead to revolutionary medical breakthroughs. Jake and Zalara looked at each other with surprise. They had long ago accepted that they would never have children of their own, but they had found joy in being honorary parents to many of the young beings on their ship and in their empire. What kind of breakthroughs? Zalara asked, her scientific mind immediately interested. Your combined genetic information has helped us understand how to create universal medicines that work on multiple species. Dr. Rodriguez explained, we're also developing new technologies for healing that combine human adaptability with Vorthok precision. Your love story isn't just changing politics, it's advancing science. After the call ended, Jake and Zalara sat quietly for a moment, holding hands and thinking about this news. Their marriage had already changed the galaxy in ways they never expected, and now it seemed like it would continue to bring benefits they had never imagined. Their peaceful moment was interrupted by alarms. Throughout the ship, Sarah's voice came over the communication system. Captain and Queen to the bridge immediately. We have a situation. On the bridge, they found their crew gathered around the main display screen, which showed a massive fleet of ships approaching their position. The ships were painted with the red and black colors of the Extremist Coalition, a group of species that opposed any form of interspecies cooperation. They're demanding that we surrender ourselves for trial on charges of crimes against natural order, Sarah reported. The fleet is led by General Dexmail of the Saurian Empire. He claims to have the authority to arrest you both. Jake felt anger rise in his chest, but Zalara placed a calming hand on his arm. How many ships are we facing? She asked. 30 warships against our one vessel, the tactical officer reported. We're seriously outnumbered. Before Jake or Zalara could respond, their communication system activated again. This time, it was not an enemy calling them. Ships began appearing all around them. Vessels from the Earth Defense Force, the Vorthok Imperial Navy, the Crystalline Collective, the Aquatic Federation, and dozens of other species that had signed the Haven Accords. This is Admiral Patricia Collins of the Earth Defense Force, came a familiar voice over the radio. Any hostile action against Captain and Queen Murphy will be considered an act of war against all signatory species of the Haven Accords. Jake smiled as he recognized his former boss's voice. Admiral Collins had been one of his harshest critics, but she had eventually come to understand the importance of what he and Zalara were doing. This is Fleet Commander Vexcar of the Vorthok Imperial Navy, came another voice. Jake was surprised to hear from Zalara's former critic, the Unity is under the protection of the combined Allied fleets. General Vexmal, you are outnumbered 5-1. Withdraw your forces immediately. Faced with overwhelming opposition, the Extremist Coalition fleet slowly withdrew, but not before General Dexmail sent one final message. This is not over. Abominations, your unnatural union will be the downfall of all pure species in the galaxy. As the enemy ships disappeared into hyperspace, Jake and Zalara were surrounded by messages of support from their allies. The incident had actually strengthened their position by showing how many species were now willing to fight to protect the principles of acceptance and cooperation. 6 months later, Jake and Zalara received news that changed their lives forever. Dr. Rodriguez contacted them with information about a young being who needed their help. On a distant planet, a child had been born to parents from 2 different species, a rare occurrence that had left the child rejected by both communities. His name is Alex, Dr. Rodriguez explained. His parents died in an accident, and neither species will take responsibility for raising him. He's been living in an orphanage, but he needs a family that understands what it means to be different. Jake and Zalara looked at each other and knew immediately what they wanted to do. Within a week, they had traveled to the planet and brought Alex home to the Unity. The child was small and had features from both his parents' species, making him unique in the galaxy. As Jake held the sleeping child, while Zalara used her for arms to prepare a nursery, They both felt complete in a way they had never expected. They might not have been able to have biological children together, but they had found their son in a child who needed the same acceptance and love that they had found in each other. Years passed, and Alex grew up on the Unity, surrounded by beings from dozens of species who all considered him family. He learned to speak 7 languages, played games from 12 different worlds, and never doubted for a moment that he was loved exactly as he was. The boys' presence on their ship became another symbol of hope for the galaxy. Other mixed species children began to find homes with families who understood them. Support groups formed for interspecies couples. Universities started offering courses in cross-cultural relationships. On the 5th anniversary of their wedding, Jake and Zalara returned to Haven Prime for a celebration.